Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen and I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. Today I'm doing another writer's Q&A, just some questions I've gathered about writing will give a bit more insight into me, my writing and just my approach, which might also help you with some of the problems that you're having and struggles with writing. Question 1. How do you decide if an idea is worth pursuing or not? The simplest way for me is time. Ideas are not the problem. As a writer, it's not a case of you have one brilliant idea and that's the one you've been holding in your head for years and you turn that into gold and it'll sell a million copies. That's just not how it works. Every writer has more ideas than time, and equally turning all of those ideas into something that you can sell, something, whether it's a book or a comic or a TV show, whatever it might be, you just don't have enough time to do that. So what I tend to do is I write all my ideas down. I carry them around with me for a while. I let them kind of stew. I add things to them. Sometimes the idea can stay in my head for a couple of years because it's not completely formed. There's some piece missing, some element, and I don't know what it is and I can't work it out. So I tend to kind of walk around with it and have it in my head. And when I'm out doing other things, going for a walk, watching TV, whatever it might be, it's kind of ticking over in the back of my brain. And sometimes I'll still write that idea down and kind of put it in a notebook and forget about it. And I do that with ideas for novels and characters and bits and pieces. I write them all down so they're not kind of clogging my brain up and I can focus on the project that I'm working on. I'll know the idea is worth pursuing when I come back to it and look at it again. It could be weeks, months, even a couple of years later. Often when I've finished a novel, I'll have things for what I might want to do next, but I'll also go and look to this kind of master file and look through it and think, is there anything in here that really stands out? Is there anything that's really, really good that even after a bit of time when I look at it, I think, oh, actually that is quite interesting. And then my brain starts going off and coming up with new ideas and things and spinning off from that and brainstorming. That's when I know an idea is worth pursuing. That's when I'll talk it through with someone, typically my agent, tell her what I'm thinking, tell her about what I want to do with it. And if she's quite on board and she kind of likes it, then I will develop it into a pitch or the first few chapters or whatever it might be and then go forward with it. Question 2. Do you ever feel imposter syndrome as a writer? Absolutely, yes. And I'd kind of be worried if any writer didn't feel that. If you become so famous and you sell anything and it goes to millions of copies, I'd be really worried if each time you put out a book, you weren't concerned, you weren't thinking, is this the one that's just going to end the streak of luck? Is this the one that's just going to, people go, oh, I'm just not enjoying it anymore and stop buying your books? Because every book I write, I want to challenge myself. I want to do something different. And there's no guarantee that readers will love it. There's just no guarantee that my agent and the publisher, who I'm pitching it to, will love it. And so there's always that fear when you read other books by your peers or even in different genres, or you watch something on TV or you see a film and you think, that's a brilliant idea, that's so good. Why couldn't I come up with that? That's way better than my work. Oh, mine's rubbish. Oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm wasting my time. And it all kind of builds and there's that little nagging voice in the back of your head that's telling you you're just not good enough. And I think all writers have that. If you don't care about that anymore and you're so arrogant and you're so confident and you think everything you write is gold dust, that's a really worrying sign, and authors are sometimes accused of phoning it in. Maybe that's happened when it gets to that point, or maybe they just don't care, or maybe they were having a bad day. We'll never know. But if you're not having some kind of imposter syndrome, I would be concerned. So it's perfectly natural, it's perfectly reasonable to have. You just have to find a way to quiet the nagging, annoying, pessimistic voice in the back of your head and just push through that period when you're struggling with any project and carry on. And I typically find if I'm working on a book and I'm having a difficult time, I just grind the words out, get it done. And when I look back at it, I'm thinking, actually, that's not as bad as I thought it was. It's just in the moment, it feels really bad for whatever reason. So find a way to deal with that imposter syndrome and keep going. The next question is, which part of the writing process is the most difficult for you? For me, it's probably the editing process. When I've been working on a draft, I plan my book so I know where I'm going, and there's still creative jumps in there, and I really enjoy that part. I love writing the book. I know some people say they love having written the book. I'm not one of those. I love digging into characters and working on things and adding stuff into the pot that wasn't there in the plan and growing it organically in the moment. I love that creative kind of bit. The hardest bit for me is when I have the book, it's done, I've edited it myself, I've polished it a few times, I've gone over it, then I give it to someone else and they give me their immediate feedback. I really struggle with that because it's still quite new, it's still quite sensitive, it's something that I've been working on for months, maybe a year, and it feels really close and really kind of precious. And someone else comes in and goes, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, that doesn't work for me, this doesn't work for me. And it just feels really, really uncomfortable for me. And it's ego and, there's a little bit of arrogance. And I know everything I write is brilliant, I know that. But there's still that kind of, defensiveness. So what I do is take a step back, read the notes, leave them for a couple of days. They tick over in the back of my brain. I come back and I read them a second time and trying to see what they're actually getting at. The notes, what is it actually saying? So if it says this isn't working or I don't like this person, right, then that means the character isn't as likable as I'd hoped they'd be. Right, that's something I can work on. But I still find the editing process just quite difficult. The next question is, should I join a writers group? Are they useful? I think they can be, but you might have to try different groups to find one that's a good fit for you. I've joined writers groups in the past, this is a long time ago, that was online, and I joined, I was really keen and I wanted to get feedback from other people and they get feedback from me and we all move forward, and I'd be on there 2 or 3 times a week and at the weekends too. And some people might drift in once a week, once every 2 weeks, make a couple of comments and then drift out again. And the pace was just not in line with me. I wanted someone to give me something useful, not just, this is quite good, because that doesn't help me. How does that make me improve on my work? What is it I need to work on? So you might need to look around and find different writing groups for yourself. Online is probably easier if you can do it in person. If there's a local group in your local, pub or sports hall or whatever it might be that meets up, that's really good because there's nothing like immediate feedback from someone. And equally, if it's not in person, if you can do it online via Zoom or StreamYard or something else where you can talk to the person face to face, even though it's remotely, and say, well, what did you mean by that? And get immediate feedback, that's so much more valuable because there's room for misinterpretation, there's room for mistakes in email. You can't hear tone of voice in email. And so it's really quite difficult and it can be quite slow. And if you're waiting for them and you're there waiting for you, other things are coming up. But talking to someone saying, right, what did you mean about that? Okay, why didn't you like this? What about this? I did this. Okay, that wasn't as prominent. Okay, I need to bring it forward to the front. So that kind of feedback is brilliant. Online groups can be quite useful for that. And you have maybe split off with a couple of people and make a little kind of group of beta readers or whatever it might be. But I think they're worth pursuing. If you don't know anybody locally who writes the same as you, or people within your circle of friends don't write at all, then go online, find a writers group, get useful feedback, get beta readers, find someone who can read stuff for you, you'll read stuff for them, and improve on your work. And I think it is worth doing. The next question was around attending events. Are they useful? Should I go to them? What do I think of them? I recently went to FantasyCon. This is an annual science fiction and fantasy event run by the British Fantasy Society. And I went primarily because I was going for the social aspect, to meet up with friends and peers and other people I've met at the conventions over the years and to talk to them, because after 2 years of not having events, it was great to see them. But the other reason I went is that I'm still learning. Even at this stage, even with 7 books published, there's always something you can find out and something you can learn. So I went to one panel on myths about publishing, and I recapped that recently in a video, which you can check out here. And there was some myths on there that I was aware of. There was some I didn't know, and that was explained in the panel. So I think events can be useful. It's good for making contacts in the industry. It's good for meeting people who are the same situation as you. Because if you're a writer, and some of your friends and family are not, or most of them are not, and you try to talk to them about some of this stuff, they'll smile and nod and they'll tolerate it. But if you're constantly going on about it, they'll get to the point where they just get a bit exasperated. They don't understand it. They don't know why it's so important to you, or this book's come out and it's so amazing and you want to tell them about it, and they go, oh, that's quite nice. Oh, okay. It's finding someone else who's on the same wavelength as you, who understands what you're going through, who has the same passions and drives and interests. That's brilliant. Going to events for that reason and finding your clan, your tribe, your group of people is brilliant. From a learning perspective, going to events is really good. Listening to editors, listening to agents, listening to authors, self-published and traditionally published, on panels talk about not only how they got published, but what they've learned, what have they developed, how do they work on characters, how do they do world building. And you can pick and choose what works for you. But the more information you have from people who've been there before you, the more you can learn, the more you can grow, and the more you can avoid pitfalls and mistakes and things that they've done. People always ask questions on panels, and I always find some of those are the most insightful, because people are struggling with things and they go to the panelist and say, I've got to the end of my first draft and I'm not happy with it. What do I do? How do I turn it into a good second draft? And that question may not have come up on the panel, but they'll be able to answer it. And you can get that direct feedback from people. And the out of hours stuff is equally useful, because you sit around with people, you talk about your experiences, and maybe you can find someone who's in the same position as you, who might want to work with you. You read their stuff, they read your stuff, and you've got a beta reader, which you wouldn't have had before. So events can be expensive. Events can be difficult to get to if there isn't one local to you. But if you can go to them, and there are now some events online, I would definitely recommend them and try it. Try a couple, see what it's like. And if it's not working for you, look at a different one and see if you can find a group of people or a group of writers who somewhere around the world that are on the same wavelength as you, that you can get on with and learn from and find out more about how to improve your work. So the final question is one I'm going to pose, and this is for, I guess, people who are a bit more advanced or an intermediate writer. Someone asked about this and said some of the advice I give is a bit basic for those who are just starting out. So here's a question you have to go away and ask yourself. Now, don't tell me the answer, don't comment on this, you don't need to tell me, you don't need to tell anybody. But this is something I would suggest you think about. What kind of a writer do you want to be? Sounds quite simple on the surface, but there's a lot more to it. Now, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer. There's only the answer for yourself. Some books are like popcorn. They're fun, they're enjoyable, they're exciting, they're great in the moment, and afterwards you put them down and you kind of forget about them. Books that people sometimes say airport novels, like you've got 1 week of sun a year, you're racing through the airport trying to get to your plane, you look at the bookshelves, you pull something off, oh, that sounds quite good, adventure, excitement and killers and chasing and action, great, and you take it off and you read it, you have a great time, you enjoy the book, and you put it down and probably never think about it again until next year we go and read another book. And there are a lot of readers like that. I'm a lifetime reader. I've been reading a book every day since I was probably 10 years old. I've never not had a book. But there are a lot of people who aren't like that. When they'd see me always reading books, they'd say, oh, why are you reading another book? Because they've been put off by writing. Writing isn't a hobby or a passion or an interest of them, and they don't see that. So if you're writing a popcorn book, that's the kind of books you want to do, there's nothing wrong with that. If anybody says, oh, you're not trying to create great art, that's what they want to do. That isn't what you want to do. If you want to write that kind of exciting adventure book, great, that gives someone a thrill and they enjoy it and they're really excited by it, brilliant. That's the kind of writer you want to be. Some books stay with you long after you've read them. And this could be for a variety of reasons. They could be really funny. They could be really moving. They could be really challenging. They could be really upsetting and make you go away and think about things that you hadn't thought about. They could be fictional accounts based on real events, where for something like The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, it's fictionalized based on something to do with Second World War. And you can read a history book on World War II and it's upsetting, it's distracting, but if you've got a sort of a first-hand account of a book, of someone who was there, that's really different. That kind of just stays with you and it gets in your head and you go away and think about it. Maybe you want to write books like that. Here's the other thing. I'm going to talk about a few other different types of books. You don't have to pick one and stay with it for the rest of your life. You could write a popcorn book. The next one could be a funny book. The next one could be a horror book. You could move genres. You could, move styles. So Working out what kind of writer you want to be now is useful to help you with your project, give you a little bit of clarity of what you're working on, help you think about what you're going to do in the future. But it isn't a fixed thing. You can change and grow and adapt as you as an individual change and grow over the years. I've talked about the popcorn books, they're sort of escapism books. Those are great too. Some books paint the future in quite disturbing ways. The best science fiction and fantasy is all about holding up a mirror to the present day and telling a story through a lens that's kind of askew. Science fiction writers of the 60s, 70s and earlier wrote things in their books that were quite prescient, that came to pass. Technology, the way society developed. They thought about it, they kind of projected what they think might happen, and then they created an idea, and some of these have come to pass and some of them have not. So maybe you want to be a writer who's pushing the boundaries in that way. Maybe you want to be a writer who pushes the boundary in terms of the genre. So you could think about the fantasy genre and think about, okay, what can I do that's so different and radical and that's never been done before, that people will remember, that will stand out. If you want to write a book like that, try and crack that code. Try and find something that's so different and special and extraordinary that people will remember long after they've finished reading it. Some books ask difficult questions, whether it's of the reader, whether it's of society, whether it's what's going on at the moment in the news, and based upon all of these things, they create a story which makes you uncomfortable, that you literally want to put down. I'm not saying necessarily horror or body horror. It could be just something that's really quite awkward and unpleasant on purpose. That's not to say it's just for titillation or to make someone horrified, but you write the kind of book that someone will read and it will stay with them for a different reason. They'll go away and think about not only the book, but themselves. What does it say about them as an individual? How will they then react to the rest of society? And those kind of books are special and different, but they're not easy to do either. You will have more ideas than time. No matter where you start, no matter how old you are when you write your first novel, you will just have more ideas than the time to write all of them down and create them into novels. So think about what kind of writer you want to be today. Think about what kind of stories you want to do. Remember, it's not a fixed point in time, but all of these questions that I've posed might help you work out what your book is about, actually. It could be a great adventure story, and as I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It could be just a funny book. It could be a challenging book. But if you know that, it can bring a little bit of clarity to the project that you're working on, and perhaps for what kind of writer you want to be in the future. So what kind of stories do you want to tell? So that's it for today. I'll be back soon with another video.